Hi, my name is Mylan Oxspring. The title of this presentation is Responding to COVID-19 in Higher Education, Lessons Learned from the 2008 Financial Crisis. I worked on this over the summer with President Ruth Watkins, her Chief of Staff Laura Snow, and Director of Institutional Analysis Mike Martineau. Now, the basis of this project was to understand what factors are going to help contribute to the success of universities eventually as we move past the COVID-19 pandemic. And we used the 2007-2008 financial crisis as a model for this because of the similar economic downturn that occurred. Now, we recognize there are some differences with adjustments and different things are going to happen with COVID-19 compared to 2008, but we feel like it's a good place to start. In order to eliminate some of the factors between different universities, we use peer institutions to the University of Utah, namely public R1 research universities that grant both undergraduate and graduate degrees. This was a total of 84 institutions that were analyzed. And the core question we were trying to answer is, first, which universities improved the greatest after the 2008? And so we looked at the 2008 to 2018, one decade, and also what factors contribute to the success. So first, to answer which universities improved, we look at 6 metrics: doctoral degrees granted, annual giving by donors, faculty awards, 6-year graduation rate, faculty membership in the National Academy of the Sciences, and grants awarded. Now, we recognized universities that were the top 20 movers, so the ones that improved the most from 2008 to 2018 in each of those metrics. And that created a natural classification of 5 tiers. So universities in the top tier were the ones that improved, one of the top 20 schools that improved in 4 of those 6 metrics, tier 2, 3 of the 6 metrics, etc., all the way to tier 5 with 0 metrics improved of the top 20. And those 12 institutions that separated themselves into tier 1 and tier 2 are listed here, improving by 4 and 3 metrics respectively. Now, the first type of factor we examined was policy and leadership, things that the university can really control. So the first one, for example, in figure 2 here is really the stability, the changes in institutional leadership from 2008 to 2018. So, for example, in tier 1, all institutions in that only had 1 new leader appointed during that time, whereas some of the later tiers had 2 or 3 leaders, a faster turnover. And so we saw from tiers 1 to 2 to tiers 3 and 5 that there was relatively fewer new leaders appointed, showing that stability, even though it was not quite to a statistically significant degree. You can see that trend there. What there was not a trend with was that when we looked at where these new presidents and chancellors came from, we looked at the ones that came from internal positions, so they were already administrators in the university, and there wasn't really a trend between these tiers of improvement of the universities. The next figure here is tuition and tuition increases. There's a lot to unpack here, but the main focus and takeaway we got from it is that universities that had a lower tuition rate overall did better. And so we can see it's statistically significant between the top 2 tiers of universities and the lower 3 is that they had lower average in-state tuition overall. In both 2008 and 2018, as indicated by those colors. What we didn't see, though, was that the tuition increases, there wasn't much of a trend between those tiers of university. So it really had more to do with the absolute cost of tuition, not how much it changed over the decade from 2008 to 2018. And the last, from the policy and kind of strategic planning side, was the on-campus population. Our hypothesis was that perhaps a increase in an investment in student housing, more students living on campus would cause better outcomes, but we did not see really much of a trend at all, and the changes in undergraduates living on campus were all over the board, generally not changing a whole lot from 2008 to 2018. And the last factor here is an environmental factor, so things that university can't really control but are just fortunate enough to be in a good situation of where they are located. So the first figure is the micro and metropolitan statistical areas based on the United States Census Bureau. We used 2010 since there was a reliable census count, and then the 2018 estimate from the Census Bureau. And what we saw was that the size of the city really didn't matter in the surrounding area, but what did matter was the population change from 2010 to 2018. So universities that were in areas with the greatest population growth, as you can see here between tiers 1 and 2 to tiers 3 and 5, that there was a statistically significant difference between the regions surrounding those universities, that they had so much more population growth happening, which showed a thriving city correlated with institutions doing well based on our metrics. And the last figure here is the state funding, so the amount of the average state appropriations granted by the state government. And again, here is interesting that, again, the actual amount of money given really didn't play as much of a role, and really the top tier universities had less money given to them on average. But what we did see was that there's a huge difference between the change in those state appropriations over time from 2008 to 2018. So those top tier institutions received an increased amount of funding in that decade compared to those lower institutions, and we can see that fully compared to those top two to those bottom three, that there was a significant increase in their funding compared to those bottom tier universities in terms of the metrics. Now, overall, what does this say? I mean, it's hard to pinpoint the exact things that caused prosperity from 2008 to 2018, but we can see some of these environmental factors had a potential role. There's a correlation there. Some of the policy and leadership, there didn't seem to be as much of a degree of significance in what happened, but something to keep in mind is that there also needs to be qualitative factors that need to be studied in addition to these quantitative measures. Reaching out to some of these institutions and asking, what was your approach, what was your mindset in responding to 2008, and how are you taking that into COVID response as well? And there could be a common thread between those universities and what their approach was, financially and with marketing and responding to these crises. So there's a lot of limitations. There's more studies, there's more factors that need to be studied, but overall, when this is all said and done, it could help inform decision making at an administrative level into forming a best response to COVID-19. Thank you for listening.